one of the questions I get asked more than any other is, how is it that the regime can just brazenly, openly, bald-faced lie and think that they can get away with it? How is it that they just lie through their fucking teeth all the time, right? Several days ago, J.D. Vance said that ICE agents had absolute immunity. And then he had to walk that back just a couple of days ago and be like, I never said that. I never said that. Bitch, we have a clip of you saying it. You absolutely said it. And then earlier today, Stephen Miller said that Alex Pretti was a would-be assassin because he was exercising his 2A rights. We've seen Kristi Noem and Tricia McLaughlin from DHS lie over and over and over, falsely accusing the people that they victimize of being thugs, gang members, criminals, violent, domestic terrorists, extremist leftists. And today they tried to paint Alex, a nurse who worked for the VA, who his friends and colleagues said was a peaceful, affable, respectful, kind human being. They're trying to say that he's an assassin. They tried to lie and say he aggressed. He pulled out his gun and went toward Customs and Border Patrol agents. Like, we can see all the video. We watched the video from both angles. That's absolutely not what happened. So how is it they can lie so openly? They said Renee Good tried to run over Jonathan Ross. They are still saying that. They said that he was in the hospital with internal bleeding and then had to recover at home for weeks. That's bullshit, and we all know it. Why is it that they are lying so confidently over and over and over again? You could say because there's a bunch of, there's a bunch of MAGA boomers who believe everything they hear on Fox News and everything they see on Facebook, and they believe the propaganda of the regime is fucking gospel truth. Yeah, okay, that's part of it. But it's more than that. This is a specific tactic that I've spoken about for a long time, since probably like 2018, 2019. Donald Trump employs a tactic called post-truth politics, where the truth doesn't matter anymore. If you can make all political rhetoric, conversation, discourse completely untethered from the truth, it becomes much easier to manipulate people and to dismantle norms, standards, proper procedures, and the law. I think it's worth everybody spending a little time learning about what post-truth politics is, but then there's this other layer to it, right? It's full-on fascism now. It's been full-on fascism for at least a year. But under a fascist regime, propaganda is crucial, because a fascist regime cannot maintain its power without the support of the people. Someone in my comments earlier today said, America is just like 1930s and 40s Germany. Americans are the same as Germans. And I'm like, no, we're not. No, we're not. Because Hitler had the support of the people pretty overwhelmingly. He was popular. Donald Trump is deeply unpopular. It's an entirely different situation. A fascist cannot hold on to power when the majority of the people oppose him, and in particular, when we organize, mobilize, and engage in sustained resistance, he's going to topple. He's going to fall. So they have to try and get people on their side. They have to propagandize people. They have to straight up fucking lie to you, because the truth of what they're doing is reprehensible. It's immoral. It's brutal. It's oppressive. It's awful. They can't tell people what they're actually doing. They have to dehumanize their victims, or they have to play Darvo, right? Where they deny what they're doing. They attack the people who are trying to explain truthfully what the regime is doing. They also have to attack their victims, and then they reverse victim and offender. They claim that the victim is actually the offender, and they pretend that ICE chuds are the victims when they're not. They're the aggressors. They're the ones violating the law every time. There have been more than a dozen cases thrown out of court in the last year, or where defendants were found not guilty, where ICE accused them of assault, accused them of hurting ICE agents, and it didn't hold up in court. Why? Because Kristi Noem and Tricia McLaughlin fucking lie. And they're hoping that the courts won't work, but they are. They're still holding. Justice is still working through the courts. Juries are still finding defendants not guilty. So why do they continue to lie then? If it's not working in court and Donald Trump is overwhelmingly unpopular, it's because they only have so many tools in their playbook. Fascists are really predictable. This is why I'm frustrated that it's taking us so long. I'm frustrated that more people didn't see this coming, because fascists are entirely predictable. Not only was Project 2025 published, public, everybody, so many people tried to warn us. Kamala Harris tried to warn us. People laughed in her face. But in general, fascists follow a predictable pattern. It's not that different from a malignant narcissist, because Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, malignant narcissists, right? We know what they're going to do. We know the tactics that they're going to employ: threats, intimidation, and violence, lies, and propaganda. They have to propagandize you. They have to get you either emotionally spun up to the point where you do something stupid, something unstrategic that allows them to advance their agenda, something like rioting or shooting an ICE agent, which is exactly what Stephen Miller wants somebody to do. He's just salivating at the idea of somebody shooting an ICE agent so that he can make Donald Trump, he can whisper in Donald Trump's ear, time to invoke the Insurrection Act. Don't take the bait. They're trying to get you emotionally spun up from their propaganda to the point where you do something unstrategic, something that hurts you and hurts our cause, or they're trying to freak you the fuck out so hard that you shut down. I think a lot of this lying from the regime is not so much to try to convince people, because we can watch the tapes and we can say, that's not true. Nice fucking try. You're not fucking gaslighting us. It's this posturing of like, truth doesn't matter. We determine what truth is. Or we determine that truth is irrelevant. We can say whatever we want and we can get away with it. We can lie through our teeth and we can get away with it. That's how powerful we are. But they're not powerful. They're incredibly, incredibly weak in this moment. That's why they're desperately escalating. It's that extinction burst behavior. It's all slipping through their fingers. They are losing their grasp on power, so they're desperately trying to clamp down with more and more violence and more absurd rhetoric. It's absurd, and we all know it. And actually here, I want to take a moment and read from Timothy Snyder's On Freedom, because when I was thinking about what Stephen Miller and Greg Runt-Bovino said earlier today, I was reminded of this chapter, which most of us read on tyranny in the run-up to the 2024 election, but I think On Freedom is better. This is a book I keep going back to over and over again. So Snyder talks about how there are these different forms of freedoms: sovereignty, unpredictability, mobility, factuality, and solidarity. And I want to read this little passage here because, man, it just came right to the forefront of my mind as I was watching press conferences earlier. We have named the first three forms of freedom: sovereignty, unpredictability, and mobility. Factuality is fourth. To get purchase on the world, we have to test ourselves and our convictions. Truthfulness is not an archaism or an eccentricity, but a necessity for life and a source of freedom. The science of global warming is an example of a general truth. We may not want to hear about it, but if we ignore it, we are less free. Without factuality, every form of freedom is menaced. We cannot know how brains develop, so we cannot educate for sovereignty. We cannot know how algorithms work, so we cannot confront the problems of social media. We don't know how few people have how much money, nor see the barriers to mobility that keep us unfree. Without facts, we can't measure the change in the climate. When we are open to facts, they help us to be unpredictable and therefore free. Because facts are not what we expect or what we want. They don't fit our prejudices, but they knock holes in them. They challenge what people around us think. Facts temper our minds to resist the machine's power to predictify us. Goethe, the greatest of German writers, spoke of significant roughness. And as we pass through life, we take hits from bruising truths, which keep us fit and unruly. We cannot enable freedoms without institutions, which we cannot build without some sense of shared reality. Values will vary from person to person, and so it must be that facts anchor our conversations about which structures we decide to build together. If we have different values, we will nevertheless sometimes have a shared interest in action. But if we have different facts, concord is impossible. We can disagree about how we best get clean water, but if we disagree as to whether lead is poisonous at all, we're not going to get very far. Facts enable sovereignty by allowing people to decide for themselves without relying on authority. Facts are needed for court rulings and elections. Facts enable self-defense against the wealthy and powerful. Since they can be known in common, they can enable individuals to seek allies and justice. If it is agreed that facts are no different from opinions, then free people have no ground on which to make a stand. That is what the Trump regime is trying to do here. Untether us from facts. Decide for us that facts are not real, that facts are no different from opinion. So it's more important than ever that we give no weight, no credence to their propaganda, and that we counter their lies with fact, with the truth.